In August 1840, under a full moon's glow, the Texas coastal towns of Victoria and Linnville tremble. Hundreds of Comanche warriors led by chiefs like Buffalo Hump descend with precision. Hooves thunder across the grasslands. Torches ignite warehouses. Settlers flee to boats offshore, watching flames consume their homes. Herds vanish into the night, driven north by raiders who melt back into the vast plains. This is the Great Comanche Raid, a strike that burns fear into the heart of a young republic of Texas. One metric stands stark in a single campaign. The Comanche seized thousands of livestock, leaving coastal settlements crippled. This raid is no isolated act. For 3 centuries, the Comanche instilled dread across the southern plains. Spanish governors in the early 1700s penned frantic letters warning of raiders who strike New Mexico's fringes and vanish. Mexican officials in the 1830s, grappling with the War of a Thousand Deserts, watched northern provinces bleed under relentless Comanche assaults. By the 1870s, United States officers hardened by civil war launched the Red River War to crush a power that defies their expanding nation. The phrase Comanche Moon enters the lexicon of settlers Mexican-Texan-American, synonymous with nights when full moons light the way for raiders and no frontier feels safe. How does a nation peaking at perhaps 20,000 people scattered in semi-independent bands force empires to rethink their strategies? The Comanche are not merely another tribe. They forge a horse-powered realm, Comancheria, stretching from the Arkansas River to the Rio Grande, across what is now West Texas, eastern New Mexico, and western Oklahoma. On paper, Spain, Mexico, Texas, and the United States claim these lands. On the ground, Comancheria rules through mobility trade and fear. This is the story of an indigenous power that stalls imperial dreams for generations. By the early 1800s, the Comanches stand as a force that reshapes the southern plains. They call themselves Nʉmʉnʉʉ, the people. The name Comanche derives from a Ute term, roughly translating to anyone who wants to fight me all the time, a fitting descriptor for a nation that commands respect through strength. Their story begins centuries earlier as Shoshonean peoples migrate south from the Rocky Mountains in the late 1600s, part of a broader expansion. By the early 1700s, they reach the southern Great Plains, displacing Apache groups who once dominated the region. This migration marks the birth of Comancheria, not a state with fixed borders, but a lived geography defined by grass bison and an Aints that had the reach of horse-mounted warriors. Comancheria thrives on its environment. Vast grasslands, mild winters, and clear streams sustain massive horse and bison populations. These are not mere resources. They are the engine of Comanche power. Horses enable rapid movement, deep raids, and flexible responses to threats. Bison provide protein hides and trade goods, fueling both war and commerce. Unlike empires with surveyed lines, Comancheria's boundaries shift with the seasons, the herds, and the range of its raiding parties. This fluid realm stretches across modern-day Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and northern Mexico. These are a zone where imperial claims falter. 4 powers encounter this reality. Spain in the 1700s struggles to hold New Mexico and Texas against Comanche raids. After 1821, Mexico inherits these vulnerable frontiers, its northern provinces battered by relentless strikes. The Republic of Texas, from 1836 to 1845, grapples with a neighbor it cannot subdue. The United States, after annexing Texas, faces the same challenge, culminating in the 1870s, with campaigns to end Comanche freedom. The fear these empires feel is not mere panic. It stems from a truth: the Comanche wield an indigenous power that stalls, diverts, and reshapes their ambitions for over a century. The Comanche rise begins with a revolution, the horse. In the 1600s, they are Shoshonean nomads, relying on dog-drawn travois for mobility. By the 1730s, they transform. Horses introduced by Spanish colonizers remake their world. The Comanche become fully mounted bison-hunting nomads, among the earliest plains peoples to center their economy on equine power. Horses are more than tools. They are wealth, status, and strategy. A warrior's herd, sometimes numbering hundreds, measures his prestige. Large herds enable swift camp relocations, deep raids into enemy territory, and evasion of imperial armies. By the mid-1800s, Comanche horse wealth makes them central brokers in a continental trade network, supplying mounts to native allies and Euro-American traders alike. The southern plains themselves amplify this advantage. Comancheria's grasslands, stretching from the Arkansas River to the Rio Grande, support vast horse and bison populations. Mild winters and abundant streams ensure year-round grazing. Bison herds numbering in the millions provide sustenance and trade goods from hides to sinew. This ecology grants unmatched mobility. Comanche bands can relocate entire villages, Typees families' herds in hours, evading Spanish dragoons or Texan rangers. Armies march, Comanche ride. This ability to vanish into the plains frustrates imperial campaigns, turning Comancheria into a shadow empire that cannot be pinned down. Politically, the Comanche defy easy categorization. They are not a single nation-state with one chief. Instead, semi-independent bands, Yamparika Kotsoteca Nokoni Penateka Quahati, operate across distinct regions named by geography or outsiders' observations. Bands unite when interests align for major raids or trade, but act independently otherwise. This decentralized structure baffles empires seeking a single leader to negotiate or defeat. Early clashes cement this fear. By 1700, 6 Spanish officials in New Mexico report Comanche raids on their northeastern frontier. Through the mid-1700s, Comanche and Ute strikes force Spain to mount punitive expeditions, often returning empty-handed. Meanwhile, Comanche pressure pushes Apache groups south and west, turning former Apache lands into Comancheria. Spain learns a hard lesson: conventional warfare fails against a mobile, adaptable foe. By the 1700s, the Comanche emerge as a frontier superpower. Spain, holding New Mexico and Texas, adopts a defensive stance. In 1749, New Mexico's combined Spanish and Pueblo population numbers only a few thousand, dwarfed by Comanche influence. Texas, in the 1770s, counts mere thousands of Spanish settlers. Comanche raids expose this fragility, striking ranches and missions with impunity. Spanish governors alternate between war and diplomacy, their punitive campaigns often chasing ghosts across the plains. By the 1780s, Spain seeks peace, forging treaties with Comanche bands in New Mexico and Texas. These agreements are not mere truces. They signal Spain's recognition of Comanche power as indispensable. An empire negotiates with a people it cannot conquer. The 1900s bring new challengers. After 1821, Mexico inherits Spain's northern frontiers, weakened by sparse garrisons and economic strain. Comanche raids intensify, targeting Chihuahua and other northern states. Historians describe this as the War of 1,000 Deserts, a period from the 1830s to 1840s when Comanche and allied raids devastate Mexico's north. Villages pay tribute, flee, or arm themselves as raids penetrate 400 wired miles south. The Republic of Texas, born in 1836, faces similar pressure. President Sam Houston pursues peace, culminating in the 1844 Treaty of Tehuacana Creek, a fragile accord with vague territorial lines. His successor, Mirabeau B. Lamar, chooses war, advocating native expulsion. The 1840 Council House fight, where Texan treachery sparks Comanche retaliation, ignites the Great Comanche Raid. Victoria and Linnville burn, showcasing Comanche range and resolve. Raids into Mexico reveal their operational scale. Bands of 200 to 800 warriors, often striking in autumn, target horses, captives, and livestock. Captives are sometimes adopted or ransomed, turning northern Mexico into a virtual tributary zone. These strikes strain Mexico's resources, fueling debates over national capacity as the U.S.-Mexican War looms. The United States, annexing Texas in 1845, inherits this frontier challenge. Early encounters mirror earlier empires' struggles. Comanche bands negotiate but preserve their autonomy. Two forces loom, however: America's industrial growth enabling sustained campaigns, and the market-driven slaughter of bison herds eroding Comancheria's ecological base. By 1874, the Comanche face a reckoning. Decades of raiding and resistance alongside Kiowa, Southern Cheyenne, and Arapaho allies prompt a decisive U.S. response. The Red River War begins a multi-column campaign to force remaining free bands onto reservations in Indian Territory. That summer, a war party's attack on buffalo hunters at Adobe Walls triggers a full military escalation. The campaign's turning point comes on September 28, 1874, at Palo Duro Canyon. Colonel Ranald S. Mackenzie leads cavalry into the canyon, surprising a large encampment of Comanche and allied peoples. Lodges burn, winter stores are destroyed, and roughly 1,500 to 2,000 horses are captured. Most are shot to prevent recapture, stripping the Comanche of mobility and the means to survive a plains winter. The loss at Palo Duro Canyon breaks the back of free Comancheria. The Quahati band, led by Quanah Parker, holds out longest. As bison herds dwindle and horses vanish, their options narrow. On June 2, 1875, Quanah Parker's group enters Fort Sill, surrendering to U.S. authorities. The Red River War ends, and with it the era of free-roaming Comanche on the southern plains. This climax reveals the scale of Comanche power. It takes a modern army coordinated across multiple fronts, the destruction of bison herds, and the deliberate slaughter of horses to defeat a nation that held Spain, Mexico, and Texas at bay for generations. Comancheria falls not to superior strategy alone, but to an ecological and industrial onslaught no indigenous power could withstand. The Red River War's end marks a brutal transition. Comanche bands are relocated to Fort Sill and other designated areas in Indian Territory, their nomadic life extinguished. Disease, land loss, and federal oversight define reservation life as the Texas Panhandle and former Comancheria open to ranching and farming. Empires exhale their fears, allayed but at a cost. Spain's early treaties fade from memory, overshadowed by narratives of conquest. Mexico, scarred by the War of a Thousand Deserts, bears lasting demographic and economic wounds. Texas and the United States celebrate the frontier's opening, often erasing the Comanche's role in shaping it. The fear they inspired, rational, rooted in a sophisticated indigenous power, slips into myth. The Comanche legacy endures. Historians like Pekka Hamalainen argue that from the 1750s to 1850s, Comancheria functioned as an empire wielding influence through mobility, trade, and raiding across a vast borderland. Some scholars hesitate to use empire, citing the Comanche's decentralized bands, but the scale of their impact from New Mexico to northern Mexico, Arkansas River to Balcones Fault demands a rethinking of power. In Mexico, Comanche raids destabilized the North, shaping the U.S.-Mexican War's context. In the United States, their defeat enabled railroads, ranches, and federal expansion to the Rio Grande. Today, the Comanche Nation, headquartered in Lawton, Oklahoma, governs itself, preserving its culture through museums and institutions. The phrase Comanche Moon lingers in Texas memory, a faint echo of a power that once held empires in awe. What is an empire? Should the Comanche be counted among them? How does recognizing their power change the story of the Southern Plains? These questions challenge viewers to reconsider history, to see the grasslands not as empty, but as fiercely defended by a nation that forced the world's mightiest powers to pause.